Hello and welcome to the IET. This is a webinar on the Third Amendment to BS 7671/2008. This is an overview of the proposed changes, and by proposed we mean that these changes haven't been agreed by the committee yet. The idea is that the Third Amendment will be issued on the 1st of January 2015, and until that point these are proposed changes. But I'd like to talk you through them. Okay. To introduce myself, I'm Mark Coles, I'm the Technical Regulations Manager at the IET. And we'll be working through slides here, so as I change my slides you should see them on the screen, they'll be updated there. Now on the screen here is, it shows historic versions of the regulations. We've got the red version, which was 2008, this was the 17th edition, and you can see on the screen there that it consisted of 389 pages. And then we moved on to the First Amendment, which was 2011, it's a green cover there, and you can see, I'm just looking at my screen, 463 pages. So as you can see, when the regulations are updated, they will increase in number, and therefore the number of pages in the book will increase. Now this is due to what's happening in Europe, what's happening internationally. We align with the international and European standards. So as they change, we need to amend our standard. It's a constant evolving process. We'll never get to a point where that's it. There'll be no more changes. Unfortunately, things change and things evolve. So we need to move on. Now on the screen there you can see the proposed cover for the Third Amendment. It's a yellow cover, and those of you that know the history of the regulations will know that the covers change in colour. This is to highlight we have a new amendment, a new cover, a new book. This will be a consolidated version. Now by that I mean it will have amendments 1, 2 and 3, and it will also have the corrigendum for section 710, which was medical occasions in 2013. So it combines all those and again includes amendment number 3 for 2015. On the screen there you'll see CENELEC and IEC links. As I mentioned, we have to amend our wiring regulations because of changes in Europe and changes to standards internationally. Now because of our involvement with Europe, we align technically with the HDs of Europe. Now if you follow these links, if you look at the first link there for CENELEC, www.cenelec.eu. If you go to that site and do a search for HD's Harmonised Document 60364, you can see all of the standards that we base our regulations on, and you can see the current status of each of those standards. You probably won't be able to see the content, but nevertheless you'll be able to see what's coming through and what's on the horizon for future amendments. So it's a handy tool to know where changes will occur in the future. Okay, so we'll move on. So we'll get into the regulations proper, the changes proper. Now this first screen you'll see talks about the numbering system. You may recall that when the 17th edition came out, we moved away from a hyphened numbering system to a dot numbering system, and that was because we adopted the IEC numbering system. Now on the screen here you'll see it refers to a 100 numbering system and 200 numbering system. So where we have the 100 numbering system, this relates to CENELEC HDs. These are regulations which are purely HDs, and we've brought them in. If you think about it, as we move along and we include new regulations, if they're new UK only regulations, we have to sort of create a space and drop it in. And if you do that, you then move the numbers on, and regulations will be out of sequence when we compare back to IEC numbering. So what happens is we need to have some kind of system to allow us to drop things in where we need to, and that's where the 100 and 200 system comes in. So 100 signifies that the regulation has its origin in a CENELEC HD, and the 200 numbering system here shows that it's a UK only. Now there are a number of UK only regulations. If you think about it, we have ring circuits in the UK that tend not to have them in Europe. So we need a facility to drop in requirements on ring circuits. This regulation here on the screen, 433.1.203, accessories to BS 1663 may be supplied to the ring final circuit. That's an example there. And there are others throughout the book. Not too many, because there aren't many UK only requirements, but there are some. So when you see the .200, and it could be .201, 202, 203, etc., that signifies it's UK only. Okay, so that's one change. The next change from part 2 is from the definitions. Now on the screen there you can see instructed person electrically, ordinary person, skilled person electrically. Now In the past, we referred to a competent person, but competent person is referred to in legal documents like the Electricity at Work regulations. It was deemed not a requirement to include the word competent person anymore because it is a legal requirement. You need to be competent to do the work that you're doing. So from there, the definitions of these persons referred to in the regulations have been tweaked. So you can see there, an instructed person electrically, that's a person obviously instructed to do electrical work. Now the ordinary person doesn't have the word electrically beside it because an ordinary person is someone who isn't electrically competent. So that's why that is there. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Now this is an interesting one. 411.3.3 additional protection. You may recall that we brought in additional protection in the 17th edition in 2008. An additional protection required that we had RCD protection at 30 milliamps on particular circuits. Now, in this particular regulation, we require additional protection at 30 milliamps for things like cables in walls, socket outlets, that sort of thing. Now, an exception is provided here. Where a socket outlet is provided for use by someone, the regulations require that it's protected by a 30 milliamp RCD. In certain situations, it might be argued that RCD protection would not be required. An example could be we're in an office like this and the sockets are provided for use by the IT department. They come in, they plug in the computers, and everything that's plugged in has been tested through the portable appliance testing regime. So everything that's plugged in has been tested, and those sockets are in control by the employer. And the employer says that you shouldn't bring in your phones to charge, you shouldn't bring in heaters or radios, so therefore they're in control of the socket outlets. So from that point of view, it could be argued that RCD protection would not be required. Therefore, the regulations now permit a risk assessment route to be that can be taken. It isn't for use from a dwelling point of view, a domestic installation, if you like, in a house. It's from a more commercial and industrial situation, so that the designer could carry out a risk assessment, and the risk assessment could highlight that RCD protection would not be required in this circumstance. Okay, so that is an interesting one. The next one relates to Regulation 411.4.5. This is C-min. Now this is and I'll read it from the screen here because I can never remember this. C-min is the minimum voltage factor to take account of voltage variations depending on time and place, and changing of transformer taps and other considerations. Now this has come about because of TR is a technical report. CLC Senelec TR technical report 50480/2011. The consequence of this is that a factor of 0.95 has been applied to all earth fault loop impedance values across the regulations. So if you consider, as you can see on the screen here, table 41.2, every value of earth fault loop impedance for every protected device has been amended by a factor of 0.95. So this affects all those tables in chapter 41. So all those tables at low voltage and also those at reduced low voltage, the 110, 55, 0, 55. So they've all been changed. So if you think about it, every circuit that you install is affected by this. The next one, 421.1.200. This is a 200 numbering system here, so this is a UK only requirement. Switchgear assemblies, including consumer units, shall, and as you can see on the screen, item 1, have their enclosure manufactured from non-combustible or non-readily combustible material. Or part 2 to this regulation, or be enclosed in a cabinet or enclosure constructed of non-combustible or not readily combustible material. Now, if you consider you've got a consumer unit on an escape route. Now, an escape route could be a staircase, and if you have a consumer unit beneath the staircase, and if the connections are loose within there, for example, and it catches fire, that escape route could compromise someone's escape from the building. So it's a requirement, it will become a requirement that the enclosure is manufactured from non-combustible or not readily combustible material, or be in a similar enclosure. There is a change here with the implementation of this regulation. The regulations, the third amendment, is issued the 1st of January 2015. Now there's a 6-month period where people retrain, where companies retool, and the regulations actually go live on the 1st of July 2015. There's a further 6-month delay on this regulation. So this regulation in itself will go live on the 1st of January 2016. Next one. There's been an inclusion here in 424, section 424, protection against overheating. And as you can see, these 3 regulations here, forced air heating systems, requirements for airflow and 2 temperature limiting devices should be included in those forced air heating systems. The next one, appliances producing hot water or steam, protection against overheating in all service conditions. And the third one there, space heating appliances, the frame enclosure shall be non-combustible. So there are requirements coming in for those types of heating systems to protect against overheating. Commonly you'll find that these systems will meet a product standard. Often not. If it's a system that's put together with parts or whatever, you'll need to take into account these requirements. 512.1.5 compatibility. This is an interesting one. Because of our involvement with Europe, we have to take on European directives. The EMC directive, which was 2004, I think it was 2007, there was a requirement that all electrical installations need to comply with the EMC directive. If you think about it, every electrical installation is different from another, but you might have a part that complies with the EMC directive. You might have other parts that comply with the EMC directive, but putting them together in installation, there are other parameters that were never considered by the designer of the product, if you like. So all installations now have to comply with the EMC directive, and it's a requirement that the designer of the fixed installation shall ensure that the installed equipment, etc., meets the EMC directive, and that there's a folder made available on site. So the person responsible for EMC on site must retain the information and make it available for inspection in the future. So that's coming in 512.1.5. 521.200, this is a 200, remember this is a UK only regulation. Wiring systems in escape routes. Wiring systems in escape routes shall be supported such that they will not be liable to premature collapse in the event of a fire. What has happened is that cables above, and I'm looking above me now, you probably can't see, there's a false ceiling here, where in the event of a fire, if the false ceiling was to collapse, cables obviously can fall from the ceiling, because often you find that they're thrown around up there. The cables can fall down and people can get trapped in the cables as they've fallen down. So it is a requirement, it's now a requirement to ensure that the cables are supported in escape routes. So that was 521.200. The next one, and it's a new section, this 557 auxiliary circuits. So this applies to auxiliary circuits. Now what are auxiliary circuits? These could be control circuits, signalling circuits, measuring circuits, CTs if you like, that kind of thing. They apply to unearthed or earth systems and to where the supply is obtained from the local circuit or from an independent source, could be AC, could be DC. So that is a new section that's coming. Won't affect everybody of course, but some people it will. The next section, 559, which is luminaires and lighting installations. To start with, this has been split. Outdoor lighting installations has become a part 7. It's become a special occasion, and that the content of what was in 559 on that area has been moved out to section 714. The other part that's been moved out to part 7 is extra low voltage lighting installations. That's been picked up. It's now deemed to be a special occasion and has gone into section 715. And there's been some changes to those. But what's gone in, what's also been added in section 559, 559.5.4, requirements for the connection of luminaires to the supply. Previously we had connections to the wiring, and now we're talking about connections to luminaires. So there are particular standard references within that regulation. 559.5.6, protection of cables connected within or passing through a luminaire. You know, when, for instance, if you've got a long workshop or a warehouse situation and you've got cables installed in conduit, for example, and you've got surface mounted luminaires, you might need to run the cables through that luminaire to go on to the next one. Well, there are requirements in there now to protect that cable from things like not only overheating but from UV, because they might be exposed to a particular frequency of light. Okay, so that's an interesting one, 559. On now to part 7. This is also this has become quite interesting. 701.411.3.3. This is bathrooms and rooms containing a shower. Additional protection by the use of one or more RCDs having the characteristics, i.e. 30 milliamps, shall be provided for. So in a bathroom or a room containing a shower, RCD protection at 30 milliamps should be provided for low voltage circuits serving the location. So these are not just circuits in the zone, so you might have lighting in zones 1 and 2. You might have a supply to a shower, which is in zone 1. So it's not just those circuits in the zones, it's also any circuit of the location. So you might have circuits, lighting circuit, for instance, outside of the location, that still needs RCD protection at 30 milliamps. Also, RCD protection at 30 milliamps is necessary for circuits passing through zones 1 and 2. Now, what does that mean? It could mean you might have, for instance, surface mounted installation passing through 1 and 2. You might have cables buried in a wall passing through 1 and 2. So those need to be considered. Okay. Electrical installation certificate. There's been a slight amendment to this from the point of view at where we, as we talked about earlier, where a risk assessment has been carried out and it's been deemed that RCD protection would not be required in a particular circumstance, that risk assessment has to be added to this electrical installation certificate. And as you'll probably see on the screen there, highlighted in red, it specifies that there. Also within the electrical installation certificate, there's been an amendment to the schedule of inspections. Now these haven't been finalised as yet, and we can't release them yet because they've not been finalised. But rather like the schedules that you've seen with the EICR, the Electrical Installation Condition Report, the schedules will resemble those. And it's more of a prompt. It's more of a prompt on site to make sure that these items have been addressed and identified, and a tick has been allocated to ensure it's been passed. Okay, next on the screen, you'll see, I just need to get my specs on here, with a small print. That's right, roof space. EICR, Electrical Installation Condition Report. There's a prompt here within this form to ensure that when a periodic inspection is being carried out, that the person also gets up into the loft space and has a look what's going on there. Often we see people might have said, for instance, no access to the loft, I haven't lifted the carpets, this kind of thing. Well, there's now a prompt. You need to go up in the loft. And the reason is that more installations are becoming more prevalent in the loft. There might be PV, for instance, and there might be all the connections up in the loft there, the inverter, whatever. So it's now, prompted to get up there and have a look. So, I'm just going to summarise now and go over some of the reasons for updating the regulations. The first point is that the changes in Europe require us to update our regulations because the standards on which we base our standard on change regularly. The lines drawn in the sand, and any standard ready at that point will then take on into our regulations. And because of our involvement with Europe, the European Union, we are obliged to take on the technical intent of those standards. So that's a requirement. Also, those UK regulations that we talked about where we have consumer units which will be non-combustible, if you like, that's a UK requirement. Also, clipping cables on escape routes, that's a requirement. So that's come out of UK discussions. So that's why the regulations need to be amended. Now, one question is, how vital is it for people to keep up to date with the regulations? Well, it's very important because, firstly, that the EWR, the Electricity Work Regulations, states that one way of meeting the EWR is to follow BS 7671. So that's one way of demonstrating compliance. Also, the building regulations in England, Wales, Scotland, and of Northern Ireland require the installations to be up to standard when they're installed. So to meet the building regulations, you'll need to keep up to date with BS 7671. And also, it's a requirement of your scheme provider. Those on schemes, rather like the NIC, EIC, Alexa, NAPIT, for instance, you need to keep up to date with the regulations, and that's a requirement of the scheme providers. How will you access these documents? And by these documents, I don't just mean BS 7671, but also guidance material. The IET has a digital platform. An annual subscription will be available, and it's a way of keeping up to date with all the changes, not just what's coming in 2015, but as things are amended throughout your subscription, these documents will be updated on the fly, if you like, and you will always be up to date. So, for instance, if an inspector comes to view to assess you and your installations, you're always up to date with the latest version of regulations and guidance. And the final point to highlight here is that we've been made aware of many counterfeit publications. You've probably heard that the regulations have been counterfeited. Some of the guidance material, the guidance notes have been counterfeited. And we've highlighted it in other videos where the content has been corrupted and the content of these counterfeit documents doesn't match the content of the wiring regulations. So if you install to a counterfeit book, you could be installing a dangerous installation. So it's always get the proper books and don't buy the counterfeits, and don't be tempted by these cheap offers on the internet, because they could bite you in the backside, if you like. So that's about it. Thank you very much. If you need any further information from the IET, there'll be an email on the screen now that you can contact us, and I hope you find this useful. Thank you.